Namaste and welcome to another session of insightful conversations at AuroBharati. This is a forum in which we, every month we talk to some individual who in his or her own domain of work has taken one of the timeless, eternal traditions of Indian cultural spirit and given a new form, a new expression to that. And in that regard, we have today with us a wonderful guest, Deepa Kiran ji, who has taken this timeless tradition of storytelling, katha, in India, Indian culture, and taken it to a new height through her work, both as an educator and as a professional storyteller. So welcome, Deepa. We are really delighted to have you with us. And before we get to hear from Deepa about her journey into the world of storytelling, I invite my colleague, Ram Kumar, to briefly introduce Deepa.
Deepa Kiran is an award-winning professional storyteller, an educationalist of an international repute. So teacher trainer engaged with employing the magical power of story arts as an intervention for meaningful transformation. So she follows her dream of offering heartful connections with conscious communication through the simple beauty of storytelling, interwoven with the childlike joys of artistic self-expression. So she is also the founder of Story Arts Foundation, and she has reached over 75,000 educators and lakhs of parents and children. So we are really waiting to have an insightful and also an inspiring conversation with Deepa Kiran. So over to Beluji.
Thank you, Ram. So tell us, Deepa, how did you get into this? Tell us a little bit about your journey into this magical world of stories and storytelling. How did you get started with that? We know that you have a background in Masters in English Literature, and have, also done some certification as a teacher trainer. So how did storytelling come into all that?
Yeah, so yes, you're right. I have a master's in English literature and a postgrad specialization in the teaching of English. I've also trained in Bharatanatyam and Kuchipudi. I worked with the All India Radio for about 5 years part-time. I trained in playing the violin for about a year, short stint, but it was good. I used to play the flute in the school band. So, and I've been a teacher. I've been a soft skills trainer, business communication skills trainer. I used to write for the Hindu and the Khalij Times, the newspapers. So primarily, as you can see, I always call life as my school, my storytelling school. And all of my different skills just seemed to have a place to integrate and to express itself. And in the process, I was getting to connect with the world. And all of this was happening with storytelling. So that's why I've stayed with it. How I came to it, one of the things is, as I always say, that anything I'm asked, I can never come to the point. So I have to have an entire story for it. It's just who I am. And I did realize in college that I'm a very good storyteller. Because one of my friends didn't watch a movie, but I had narrated it so well that when she actually watched it, she thought that she had watched it. Simply because of my description. So I began to understand that, this is something I'm really good at. I did storytelling in radio, All India Radio, Alice in Wonderland. And when I really started telling was in the schools. From 2000 onwards, I taught in a lot of Kendra Vidyalayas Belu in Hyderabad, in Jammu Kashmir, and then in Army Public School in Maharashtra. So in all of these places, to connect with my students and to bring them into the English subject, also in the substitution period, where the teacher is absent and they send you. So both of these places I started using stories and they really worked well. So that's how finally in 2007, I officially came. When I say officially, but I got paid just for telling stories. That happened sometime in 2007 or 2008. I can't remember right now. But that's when I was not well. And I was on steroids for about 6 months. 4 months, yeah. For 4 months, I was on 80 tablets of steroids. And I reached a point I said, okay, let me do something that I really love. So I held a summer camp for children where it was storytelling, crafts, and dance. 3 weeks of summer camp, 25 children. And I went back to the doctor and he said, you have to stop your medicines, you're perfectly fine. So that's how I came officially to storytelling. And that's where I had the clarity that I'm not going to leave this.
That's wonderful, and I think you've given us this interesting insight into how stories can also be a way to heal ourselves. So we'll come to that point a little later in the conversation.
Yeah.
But what I'm really curious to know about is, as Indians, we sort of like, we come from this land of storytellers, all right from the time of Vedas, Upanishads, and particularly when we come to the stage of, the phase of Itihasas, Puranas, the profoundest truths of life and existence have been told by our seers and sages through stories. And not just stories, but also performance, reenactments, personifications, and everything that sort of makes a story engaging. So I'm curious to know in what way your work as a storyteller today in 21st century is inspired by these indigenous storytelling traditions of India. I know that you have performed on like Ramayana-based stories and from other Puranas as well.
Dashavathara,
Yeah, right. So if you can just talk a little bit about that, the connection between our timeless tradition and the form in which you tell the story today, and also in whether you, in your experience, since you have given storytelling performances so many places in the world, do you think that in other indigenous cultures also the traditions of storytelling are being revived and renewed in the way they are happening in India through work like people like yours? So
Right. Yes. So to come back to your question, absolutely. We are a country of stories. We are a country of oral literature.
yes.
So things passing on just by hearing is integral to a lot of the literature. And literally, literature was composed keeping in mind that this is going to be listened to. It was not, a lot of it, what I mean is, was not written keeping in mind only the literate audience. It was written keeping in mind that people are just going to listen, which meant many things, which meant that it had to sound musical. It can't just be regular boring prose, right? It had to have a breaking in of chorus, of rhyme and ditties and rhythms, chants, musical instruments, a little bit of dance, laughter, and dialogues. Dialogues were integral, which really implies that the listener is very important. So we're literally bringing the listener into our oral stories, so the listener outside has a representation of them inside the story, because there's a listener there who's like, oh, aha, that happened, really, asking on behalf of us, sort of guiding us where to go, acknowledging our curiosity and echoing our curiosity, asking doubts, which might or might not be on our minds. All of those roles, the listener is playing, exclamating, something happened, really, the listener will say, right? So such was the nature, it is stories, it is dialoguing, it is keeping that engagement alive for the listener. We really had that element very strongly in so many of our literatures. So that way, yeah, that's a great inspiring element for me. I can't say too much exposure, but little exposure. As a child, I was with the Chinmaya mission. So every Sunday I would go for the Bal Vikas classes, and then I continued in the Yuva Kendra. So learning to chant the Bhagavad Gita, learning chapters, stories from the Gitas, bhajans. These were all something that I grew up with. And in fact, I remember the camps where Swami Chinmayananda was there, and we had a national youth camp, and he would tell lots of stories when he discussed the Bhagavad Gita with us, right? So suddenly he would say, and then she said, honey bun. He's explaining Bhagavad Gita, and he would go to context like that and come back. So I think those were very interesting references for me. And then, as you said about the presentation, oral presentations itself, Hari Katha, Burra Katha, Katha Kalakshepam, Pandavani, or you name it, Kathakali. So many forms we have of storytelling. Bogdu Katha, Sharada Katha, unending forms, Yakshagana, of storytelling all across the country. So narrating stories orally, either with some instruments or with some prop or with some puppet or different variations, individual, together, troupe. So many options are there for presentation. So I'm deeply inspired by that. And as a dancer, I've been part of dance ballets, right from the concept to the execution. And there are occasions where I did not perform with the troupe, but I was the one who had to speak. So I had to speak in English. There would be performances for international audience. So they wanted someone who can speak English well, but will not get the Telugu and the Sanskrit words all wrong and anglicized. Right. So that was a very big learning for me. And literally, I began to, take inspiration from Harikatha, Burrakatha, format of dance ballets, and see what can I do with it, given that good, bad, ugly, my most comfortable language today is English because I lived all over the country. That's the one language that stayed with me. So given that that's my comfort language, how can I stay with that, connect with the audience of today, and yet keep going back to stories, of our past, and bring in other elements from there, like the chants, like songs in different languages, like little musical instruments, right? So how can we bring all of that? And that's what I've been trying to offer. And I see a very big difference from 12 years ago when I would be asked that, oh, you're telling Dashavatara in English. Who tells Dashavatara in English? To a day where I have been invited to different countries or even in India. So I was in Guwahati last week. I was in Guwahati last week at a national conference, and I was invited to tell stories in English in my style of multilingual. So there's been such a beautiful, growth in how people are seeing it and how they're becoming so much more open to it. You were asking the next question about the other countries. Yeah. So it's equally happening in specifically, I can say I saw it in Scotland. I saw it in Indonesia, where they are going back, reading their histories, researching on their storytelling styles, and trying to see what they can do with it. It is beginning to happen in the other places. Oh, one place where it's happening at a big scale is Iran. Iran, the government itself is backing the citizens, the artists, the oral traditional storytellers. They set up centers, they offer literature, training, salaries to storytellers. Yes.
Interesting. This is, this kind of like going back to our roots in a sense, but it also has something to do with coming back to know us in a new way. Somewhat we have been sort of away from our traditions for various reasons, good, bad, ugly, like you say, but still there is a point up to which we can say, okay, this is, keep blaming our education, keep blaming the system. And then there is a point where we say, what can I do? And I see your work as a way to kind of really, bringing that positivity to dividing that work. Before we get more into your work with storytelling and education, I think Ram had one or two questions about children, and because it kind of connects with what you're just describing, your experience listening to stories as a child. So I think Ram was saying just before you joined. So Ram, would you want to go ahead?
So I thought of asking Deepa, like, why is listening to stories important in someone's life, or what will a person miss if he or she never listens to stories or reads stories, especially in the childhood? So I'm just curious to know what is that importance, or what is the role that stories play in one's life?
Yeah, I could go on and on for that answer. But just to pick on a few, right? One, I'm sure we all agree. When we look back at our childhood and think of the time, if I just say, close your eyes and remember the time when you heard stories, it just fills you with warmth. There's a smile on the face. There's this nice nostalgia about a story time that all of us have, whether we heard it in a temple, it's an official performance, or we heard it at grandmother's lap. Each of them is something that we still cherish, which I think is the biggest proof that there's something magical happening there. Some of the things that are happening there is, one, our creativity is triggered. Because when a storyteller is narrating, unlike the mobile, the laptop, or the huge projector screens, when we watch cinema, there is no visual reference. There is no external audio support. So everything is happening right here. So which really implies that every listener is creatively visualizing the story in their mind. So each and every listener is so actively involved and is a story creator, which is a very satisfying experience for anybody. So I always say at the end of a story, you will find people going like that, they've also worked hard and they've had fun working hard. Everything they imagine in their head. So that's a beauty nothing can replace, that creative visualization. And not only are we imagining the story, at every point we are imagining the opposite options, So, and then he went into the jungle. In front of him, he saw. Before the storyteller tells what did he see, the mind has seen owl, ghost, fox, all the options, right? So literally, we are not only imagining the story, we are imagining much more than the story. That happens. Then there's this very beautiful thing that Dr. Brian Strum, he uses this idea, he says that between the story, the storyteller, and the listener, there is a web of trust. There is a bond that gets created between all three. Because it is together that we create it. Unlike a music performance or a dance performance, in a storytelling, the name itself is storytelling, right? Which means there is a listener, and the listener is integral to the creation of the art. So you can rehearse a story, but you can't rehearse a storytelling without an audience. It's never a complete rehearsal in that sense. So the performance itself is together we create it. So there's this beautiful bond that gets built up between us. And I like to say that, it's like we've traveled together. It's just like you would take a travel with your friends and come back. But here, it's without a ticket. And here, sitting in one place, we have gone across time and space and we have come back. But it's the same satisfaction of shared collective memory, right? So there's a beautiful bond between all the people who experience that story together. So this happens. And then neuroscience is telling us today that all these, nowadays they talk about the 4 happiness hormones, right? Oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine, and endorphin. So in different ways, each of these are getting generated in our body. So there's de-stressing, there is a sense of reward, there is happiness, there is relaxation, there is joy, peacefulness. So science is telling us that all this is happening with storytelling. Then there's literature, there's art, there's music. We're getting exposure to all of this. Like I said, I could go on. So these are all reasons why we must engage in storytelling, and especially the imagination part. So you'll find that some of the best scientists of our times, like Richard Feynman, the physicist, or the Iranian, I'm forgetting her name, but the Iranian mathematician who won the Fields Medal Award. There's no Nobel Prize for mathematics, right? So the Fields Medal Award is the highest in mathematics. So the Iranian woman who had won it a few years ago, she herself said that all my childhood I read so many novels, and what it did to my imagination to be able to do geometry, right? There's Albert Einstein, who's again always spoken about the benefit of storytelling. So you'll constantly find even scientists acknowledging how meaningful stories and storytelling is.
Yeah, I think I read somewhere, so many things these days are attributed to Einstein. So I don't know whether this is something he said or not, but something about that if you want your child to become intelligent, read them fairy tales. If you want the child to become more intelligent, read more fairy tales. So yeah, the point about that creative imagination is very valid. But I guess there is also, I think, just a follow-up to what Ram asked. And these days, when children don't have that kind of joint family system, and where you have a grandparent or someone at home on whose lap many of us grew up listening to stories. So the only option is the mobile, right? The gadget. So can that be a replacement in some way, or?
So if you'd asked me this question when we met, in 2012, I would have said no, no way. The whole purpose is defeated, blah, blah, blah. But I have moved to the other side gradually. And I'll tell you why. It's because on a couple of occasions, my videos were recorded and they were put out on YouTube. And I had once a lady from Dubai write to me saying that, I'm struggling with this child for a very long time. He's very shy. And then I showed him this video of yours, Snorer and Singer. It's one crazy fun folk tale. Apparently, he loved it so much that the next day he went up on the days and he told the entire story to the school, not even to his class. So that for me was it was a major one. And then someone else wrote to me from Boston about something similar like that happening. Then a school wrote to me saying that they put it on the projector for 350 children. And they said, oh, we had a good time. The children enjoyed it thoroughly. So that's when I started thinking that maybe, I am making digital technology too much of a vice. And it's perhaps not as terrible as I'm imagining it is. So today I do think that technology can, somewhere midway serve this purpose, which our people sitting around in the lab are not able to for different reasons. However, I certainly still do agree that best of the best screens cannot substitute someone with you in person. Like I tell the teachers in the trainings all the time, the best of the CD-ROMs, the best of the YouTube visuals that you show your children cannot replace you making eye contact with your child, and that smile that you give, that acknowledgement you have of that giggle there, or that curious eye of another child, that can't be replaced.
Yeah, I hear you. It's like, watching a movie or going to a theater. That the experience, even as an audience, is very different, because there the engagement is of a different kind, of a different level. So tell us a little bit about your work with teacher training, with educators. What is it? How do you inspire them to use stories in their classrooms, and what kind of response or feedback you get from them when they start using some of these, I guess, techniques or tips that you share with them?
Right. Yeah. So my focus area with teachers, Belu, is one, train them in the art of storytelling. Two, especially work with teachers of English. And in non-native English-speaking countries like India. So of course, my main work is with India, but similarly, like let's say the Southeast Asian countries, Middle East, all the countries in Africa, the Spanish-speaking countries, right? We all have one common concern, which is neither the child nor the teacher, the learner and the teacher, both of them are not native speakers of English. And they have to learn the language, teach the language. And the ground reality is these teachers themselves are not confident of their English. They have trouble with their grammar, with their vocabulary. This is the ground reality in which they're working. And then they have these textbooks with stories like Goldilocks, for example, and Porridge, which is entirely alien to the child. So the language is alien, the content is alien. So where I come from is one, building their storytelling skill, the art of storytelling. And then, look, you have stories around you, which are from the lives of your learners, which are from your own life. So tell those stories. For example, when we're telling Tenali Ramakrishna to children in Telangana or Andhra Pradesh, or telling a Lambadi story, right? These are from their context, but you can tell them in English and add a few ditties, little songs, one or two words and phrases in that local language. So Tenali Rama's wife said, Ayo, what happened, Andy? Right? So our main focus remains English, but this acknowledgement of the multicultural classroom, right? Oral storytelling gives us that space where we can just, go away from the textbook, but not lose focus of our agenda, which is teaching English. So this is the space I've been working in, and I've really seen very, very interesting things happen. Powerful, meaningful work happen. In fact, I had a grant from the British Council called the Edge India Award, where I was able to, whatever informal research had happened, try and put it in a format. So I went back and redid it with a urban slum school in Hyderabad to see what is the benefit, right? So we actually had things like, I'm talking from the perspective of the teacher itself. We know that the children benefit. But the teacher herself was saying that, oh, the children are listening to me now, ma'am. Ma'am, they are telling, they're speaking in English to each other even without my telling, right? Just the urge to retell that story to each other is inspiring them to attempt speaking in English. Then, ma'am, I didn't realize that I could show climb like this. It just never occurred to the teacher, that I could use the rest of my body as well when I'm struggling with the meaning of a word. Literally simple things like that, using the whole of your body to communicate, using a context to communicate, socially relevant context for English learning. So these ways the teachers have benefited. I'll give a small example for the child. So in one school, there was a story for pre-primary children where a rat loses its biscuit. And it goes on asking different animals in the jungle, did you take my biscuit? And each animal gives the same reply. Okay. No. I did not take your biscuit, but I think you should go and ask someone else. Okay. So the snake gives the same reply. The monkey says, no, I don't think and this elephant will say, no, I did not take the. Each character, but the same dialogue, pre-primary children. In a semi-structured manner, we went about where the children, through different ways, heard the same story for 2 weeks. By the third week, the UKG teacher came running to me because this is a school in the outskirts of Andhra where the parents themselves don't speak English and the children only say, good morning, ma'am, my name is so-and-so in English. Everything else is Telugu, right? These children, in the free time, are turning to each other, snake, did you take my biscuit? No, I did not take your biscuit, on their own. Okay, and the teacher came, ma'am, what do I do? I said, be happy because you have done your effort and it's showing now. And continue. So we continued this whole engagement with that same story, Belu. 15 minutes a day of storytelling. Same story, 1 month, 1.5 months later, one child could not locate her pencil. So she's asking the other one, Harsh, did you take my pencil? And guess what? Pre-primary Harsh, who doesn't speak English otherwise, is saying, no, I did not take your pencil, but I think you should go and ask someone else. And to our luck, the chairperson of that institution was passing by the classroom and his jaws dropped that what is happening to our children, right? So no, they were not taught that grammar rule of the double negative in the past, right? Nothing. They just acquired it because the story reached them. So the two things I realized is storytelling, of course, for all the skills of listening, speaking, reading, writing, for the elements of vocabulary and grammar, for confidence, curiosity, fluency. Accuracy comes later, but fluency in the language, for all of these and many more, memory, recollection, all of these storytelling can really work wonders with the child, with the learner, not just child, even grown-ups. And the other thing is, it doesn't work if it's 100% structured. It doesn't work if it is completely random. So we need a semi-structured framework, which works very well.
This is fascinating, really fascinating. And you make me think that, like you said, it didn't occur to teachers that they could use their body language if they are, falling short of recollecting the right word. But it tells you something as to how boxed the teacher education program in general is, and why is that outside of their formal teacher training, they need this kind of exposure to the kind of work that you do with them. Why is it not part of their formal teacher B.Ed, M.Ed kind of training programs? So makes you wonder, why we are still talking about the same kind of curriculum.
So I have managed to reach some of the B.Ed, M.Ed institutions like EFLU, Maharaja Sayaji Rao University, the Home Science College. So yes, slowly we're making inroads there. Yes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that wonderful work. I mean, it gives me a lot of sense of hope and encouragement, for the future of education in India. So I don't know if Ram has something to add here, because I was thinking of just switching the topic a little bit from the point of view of education to more sort of the storytelling that we do for ourselves. So Ram, I don't know if you have any comment or question at this point, or
No, I don't have questions, but I'm in just awe of listening to all the answers that I received. The
yeah.
way that the web is created between the storyteller, and this one, and the live example that you have given now for the how story creates some changes, which is otherwise very difficult. So,
Yes, yes. And I think I'm just going to pick up on the point that you mentioned, how storytelling for children, this can be a way to grow in confidence. So, sort of like that psychological aspect of, or the psychological role that stories can play in our lives. So, you said when you were talking, just I think in response to the very first question, that what you have discovered about yourself is that you cannot come directly to a point, you have to weave a story. And I think many of us go through that exercise of weaving stories around any experience, any incidents, any circumstance in our lives. Sometimes the stories that we weave around that are source of delight, happiness, joy. We recollect those stories, and those are moments of joy. But sometimes they can be painful also, some bad things that happen in life. And how what do you see as a professional storyteller and someone who has done so much work into the art of storytelling and sort of the psychological understanding of what stories can mean and what stories can do? How do you see the role of stories in shaping our sense of who we are and what we can aspire to be? The power of stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves. So if you can just throw some light on that.
Yeah, Belu. In fact, your question itself is having the answer pretty much in it. It's so elaborately and articulated. So that is a very interesting space, As you said, it's not even most of us, it's all of us who make stories of everything that happens in our life. So I always ask the audience, who here is not a storyteller? And many hands will go up, that I'm not a storyteller. It's like, okay, who here has never, said that, what happened? At some point, each one of us has said that. And what comes after that is our version of something that happened. So if even one other person was involved in that, they will have their version of what happened, which is a simple indicator that what actually happened is not an ultimate, carved in stone reality. It's just versions that each of us makes. And what I have come to understand the little bit is with storytelling, if we can start to step back, separate us from the story, and then look at, okay, so what is the story that I'm telling myself? Like you put it, to be able to look at that, because we can see that for a friend, how storytelling offers us this ability to look is in one I'm coming back to the fiction story, right? We're talking about personal stories right now, but how it sort of builds a muscle for that is when we are listening to a story, there is a character. We are vicariously experiencing their life. And at the same time, we're able to observe, there's a step back, there's a distance from that experience. The example I like to give for this is my younger son. Okay. So when both my sons were really small, they were 2 years and 4 years, they have an age difference of 2, and they both were in the same play school. I volunteered that I'll come and teach dance on Wednesdays. So the first time I went, my elder son was very excited. Good afternoon, ma'am. And my younger son just held my leg and cried for 45 minutes at the top of his lungs, bawling away. Right. So this happened 2 weeks in a row. And then I told ma'am, I said, it doesn't make sense teaching dance to other children and my son is crying. So we came up with an idea, and at dinner time, I told him a story of a girl called Sahana, whose father was a potter, and he was invited to the school, and he came back in the evening and told Sahana's mama that, oh my God, I went to the school and Sahana, she was so helpful. She said, good afternoon, sir. Can I help you with your clay work, sir? She took me all around and it was really nice. I just told the story to my 2.5-year-old, okay, and nothing else. I just narrated the story to him at dinner time, but I could see in those twinkly eyes, there was something happening, which is he heard the story, but somewhere he had the wisdom to also reflect on his own life. So the third time I went to the school, it's not like he stopped, but I could make out that he's attempting, and he's remembering the Sahana story. So he was making an attempt to re-look at his story, rather than as something to be sorry about. Perhaps it is something that I could look at as interesting and nice. So the point is that, as you said, can we look at our stories and see whether there's another way of looking at it so that it is benefiting us? That's what we're finally concerned with. If it's going to pull me down, if it's going to make me angry, sad, helpless, fearful, it's not a helpful version. So can I pull back and look at a possible helpful version, what they call the retelling or the reframing of my story?
Yeah, I think you bring up a very important point that fits right into like our own Natya Shastra tradition, how it emphasizes the role of drama in a way that, drama should elevate. There is that vicarious experience. So there is an involvement without involvement. It is happening to someone else. So that objectivity, that stepping back. I think someone also said that art in that sense, especially dramatic arts, can be like a layman's yoga. In a way, it is like a yogic practice of stepping back, witnessing, objectifying. Yes. So and about this happy story, the happy ending part, so that it shouldn't make you fearful. It shouldn't make you give you that sense of helplessness. I think so. Where we have this tradition of ending stories on a happy note, to some of the attempts that are going on in today's cinema, which, sort of like trying to copy the realistic school of presenting all that is like really worst in the society through cinema, through stories. Sometimes I wonder if they are actually, in the name of artistic creative freedom, if it's actually harming the society more rather than elevating. So I don't know. I don't have the answer, but I just have to see it as hopefully a passing phase in our cinematic tradition, at least. So I don't know if you had any thoughts on that or comment on that.
I think at different times, different things serve a purpose, So the word I would use is what is benefiting my growth at that moment. What is serving the purpose of my growth? If I'm maybe too happy and too caught up, in just everything being nice and hunky-dory and perfect and fine, and that also is a reason to not be grounded. So whatever works for whomever in their context, to ground them and to bring them back to their flow. I prefer using the word flow and growth rather than happiness and fun and putting it as a binary. Yeah, that's how I might look at it.
Yeah. So do you want to talk a little bit about your work with the Story Arts Foundation, how you went about creating this and founding this, and what are the kinds of works and workshops that you're doing through this foundation?
So so Story Arts Foundation just happened, literally just happened, because there were many things we were doing, and there were a couple of people who said that, oh, if you're doing this anyways, why don't you set up your own trust and do it? We attempted it sometime in 2015, it didn't fall in place, and finally 2017 we set up the trust, and interestingly the government gave us some project. So through that, we could train about 2,000 teachers. We had people on board for projects. We don't have full-time even now staff with the trust. We're still nascent in that way. It's baby steps. So we had training for 2,000 teachers. Eventually, it started with 300 and good feedback, and then some more and some more. So again, with all of them, it was the same thing. Train them on the art of storytelling and how can you use it. Answering a previous question, the teachers have mindsets about storytelling, like storytelling is for entertainment, storytelling is for teaching morals. It's a subset. That's a subset of storytelling. It serves many more things. So educating them on that and showing them the possibilities with that, we were able to do that. Then we also it was very interesting. We got to work with children. We did residential camps. So we lived with children in the rural government schools for 15 days at a stretch. We had, I think, three schools at each point. So in total, across a month, we covered about 800 to 900 children. And the camp was called like whole body communication for English skills. So what I like to say, Belu, is day one of our camps, the mood was, you could smell the stink, like, oh, I wanted to go home. I've been called. I have to sit in the summer camp. I'm remembering my mother. I'm remembering this. So very first day, we gave them all drawing sheets and we said, draw where you'd like to be, what you'd like to be doing right now. And then talk about the drawings. Right? So starting from a day when they were that disconnected and uninterested and didn't want to involve, didn't want to talk, to the last day when the whole problem was, we can't have a 2-hour valedictory. We have to have a 1-day valedictory because every child wants to come on stage. They were like, I want to tell a story. I want to sing a song. I want to tell a rhyme. I want to tell a joke. So that was our biggest achievement, and in English. So that was a whole agenda, that have fun, just engage with the language, play with it. So that happened. We also did projects with the oral traditional storytellers, collaborating with them, where they are performing and I'm the Sutradhar, I'm telling their story and they are telling the Ramayana. So what happened with this was, we had the audience of today who, the Tolu Bommulu artists of Andhra would typically complain that, ever winner, madam, nobody listens to, the leather puppetry and all, children today. So it was our challenge that no, an audience of 500, 600, including children, will listen and will watch a Tolu Bommulu performance. So yeah, those kind of engagements where at the end of it, they queued up to take the business card and invite them for performances, and the elders were telling, take the blessings of the artist. So small attempts like this, to revive the traditional storytelling. And then we also work with NGOs. So the staff of NGOs, sometimes it's just to relax them, de-stress them, because in the pandemic, they were having such a tough time. And sometimes it is to train them. Same thing what we give for teachers, giving them training on storytelling and how to work. So these are the few projects that we have done. And we have hopes to work some more through the foundation. Let's see.
Wonderful. That's great. I think during these pandemic times, you've also been doing certain things virtually, right? Participating in storytelling. How did that go? What was the kind of feedback, response? And also, I think interacting with storytellers from across the world.
Yeah.
If I remember right.
Yes. And that happened a lot more for all storytellers, because the borders were just seamless now. It was just a Zoom and a Google Meet, and you are with a Scandinavian storyteller, you are with a storyteller from somewhere else, which was very beautiful. So a lot of international collaborations have been happening in storytelling, and particularly with Indian storytellers. I know that everyone's been looking to India because we are very tech savvy also. We are top on the list for tech savvy. So easily, so many have not only participated, they have organized storytelling festivals with someone from America, someone from Australia, put it all together. So yes, I've also, I didn't hold my festivals during the pandemic. I have held this festival called Damadikya, World Storytelling Celebrations. I held it in 18 and 19, where I brought in storytellers from other countries to India, to Hyderabad. But pandemic, I didn't organize, but I performed for many others. So if you ask me, how was it? The first thing was, I was one of the last people to start, the online storytelling. Everybody had gotten onto it, and it took me nearly a month or two to say, okay, let me do one of those. And the first one I got was a Facebook one. And if you know, in Facebook Live, you can't see the audience. It's not like Zoom. So it's just like you have to go on. So my first event was a Facebook Live for 1 hour. And the remarks were, oh, we didn't realize an hour has passed. We didn't realize this was online, and comments like that. So I was sitting and self-reflecting, and I was so nervous. How come I was finally so comfortable? And then I figured out that I am from All India Radio, so I'm so used to blind media. So we never see our audience, and we are smiling and we are talking as if the audience is right there. So that's really come in handy with any of my online sessions, because I'm complete. So if I get to see you, it's like bonus for me. So, oh, I get to see you also. It's like, so otherwise I'm perfectly fine. So that's been a big blessing, the All India Radio experience. And yeah, telling stories to families in London, to an entire auditorium in Sierra Leone, West Africa, where you're on the projector and they're all sitting and watching you. There's been some fun experiences on the international front. Locally, even before the pandemic, I would do this on the online on Skype. I would do it for a lot of government schools, like some school in Maharashtra, in a village in Maharashtra, in a village in Odisha. So those were really fun, and those became more again in the pandemic. So yeah, it's I would say it's been like really nice. But we certainly miss meeting in person, and I am happy to be back meeting children in person.
But you've tempted me. At least I don't know about Ram, but I'm now tempted to see one of your online performances. You can see us, so if you can just give us a little snapshot of some fun, I don't know, whatever story comes to your mind, because you have like this multilingual, multi-talent, and this vibrancy in your expression. So if you can just give us a little sneak peek into.
பொங்கல பொங்கல் பொங்கல பொங்கல் உள்ள போல பொங்க வேண்டும் பொங்கல பொங்கல் ஹோய் பொங்கல பொங்கல் ஹோய் பொங்கல பொங்கல். So it was the harvest time, the festival of Pongal. Everybody was very excited. So was this little boy. He was looking forward to the festival and to his new clothes. He went to his mama and said, Mama, you'll get me a new shirt, no? And she said, I'm sorry, beta. I do not have the time to buy you a new shirt. No shirt for me this year. I didn't say that. I said that I cannot take you to buy a shirt. So the mama took a 100-rupee note, put it in the boy's shirt pocket and said, you can go and buy it yourself. Mama, I'm so small. I don't know how to go shopping. It's very simple, beta. Whatever amount the shopkeeper says, just say half the price, okay? Okay, Mama. This made the son feel really confident, and off he went to the market. Very confidently, he went to the shop, and there the man was just pulling up the shutter when he saw this little boy. And he saw there was no one with him. Quite surprised and impressed, he said, come on in. What do you want? Uncle, I want to buy a shirt. Oh, really? Here we have pink and green and blue and red and checks and flowers and prints and stripes. Uncle, I want the plain white one. Okay. Here is a plain white one for you, and that will be 160 rupees. 80, said the boy. The shopkeeper was quite impressed. Huh? Such a little fellow come all alone and then bargaining also with me. All right, just for you, I will give it at 120. 60? Huh? That's not how bargaining happens. 60? The boy was insistent. All right, 80. 40? What? Oh, 60? 30? Who sells a shirt for 30 rupees? Take it for free. I want 2 shirts. And so the boy took 2 shirts and went back home happily with 100 rupees also in his pocket.
This is marvelous. This is wonderful. I can see now why children would, just respond the way they, like you were saying, the way they would, in the way you tell a story, the way you engage all their senses in it. So this is wonderful. Thank you so much for the little demonstration. So, you have these, like I said, like you're a multi-talented person with your experience, both, not just experience, but also training, formal training in dance and music and acting. You've also acted in a film now, right? Is there something more, that X factor, that Deepa factor, that you think you bring to your art that makes people connect with your stories and the way you tell stories?
If I have to reflect very technically, the two things, one, that I know a lot of Indian languages and songs and chants and ditties and rhymes and many Indian languages. And I play a lot of these small musical instruments. I'm in love with musical instruments. So you will find many, many, many of these in my house. So from a technical point of view, these two are what, people identify with my style of telling. Otherwise, I would think I really have fun connecting with people. It just makes me feel much larger than I am. So I think that's what connects anybody, right? Like if you are loving this interview and you are giving your heart to it, it just infectiously affects me. It comes on to me. So I think that's one thing for me. If I have to think of, I completely have fun. I thoroughly enjoy this experience of connecting with anyone, children, adults, 92-year-old, prison inmates, district court judges, scientists, you name it. I genuinely love the experience of connecting with another through this lovely, beautiful art. I think that just comes across, perhaps. Yeah.
Certainly, I mean, it does come across, even in this technical, medium of Zoom, it is coming across the way you were telling that story and the way you were, sharing everything about your work. It's just so wonderful just listening to you and watching you, the way you're responding. Ram, do you have any last question or some comment or something?
No, Billy. Actually, this conversation itself seemed like a story for me. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, certainly is. So I think we have to find a way, Deepa, to bring you here into Pondicherry and actually have a live storytelling session. I think
I'm waiting. I'm ready.
there's so much we can do online, but to have like an evening of storytelling, you said, I mean, you talked about so many different storytelling traditions of India. Did you formally train yourself through some of that, or just by exposing yourself, like attending performances, attending more indigenous storytelling conferences or something like that? Or did you train yourself? I'm just curious.
So I'm not
Yakshana or any other, sorry.
Yeah, Pandavani or any of those, no. So I am not trained in any of those. I wish, because I know that there are Burakatha schools, there are Harikatha schools, and there are mentoring programs for Pandavani and Terikuto also for many of those. Unfortunately, I'm not trained in any of those. My training is classical dance. Bharatnatyam, Indian classical dance, Kuchipudi. I used to perform Kuchipudi. So I have that reference point of the framework, and with that I have gone and watched Harikatha, Burrakatha, Pandavani or any of these, and I've really just borrowed elements which worked for me. So a person who's an Harikatha exponent, right, or who's a connoisseur, they will if they compare that with my work, they are going to be very dissatisfied. So my attempt is just pick up elements from those, which can blend with what I'm attempting today, and a lot of elements from dance, right? So for example, when I'm doing the Dashavatara and I'm talking about the floods, in the Matsya Avatara, where the flood comes in, everyone is taken up the mountain, all the creatures. So I will have a proper jati there, that dhittakanakajam tarikita dhittakanakajam tarikita ta dhim, which may not come in Harikatha. Right. But I also take the Chidatalu from Harikatha, so I play that and I'm like, come, listen, everybody, just for you, I have a story. Yeah. So different elements that seem to work is what I've picked up. I've not trained in any of these, but I've spent a lot of time like a big fan watching. And I remember I had this like real fangirl moment when I was in Chhattisgarh. There was a school that had invited me and I said, see, I'm coming to Raipur. You have to extend my ticket because I want to go and meet Tijan Bai, who's one of the world-renowned Pandwani tellers. Okay, and the school called me back after 2 days saying that we have not extended your ticket. So I was like, oh, okay. And they're like, we have invited Tijan Bai as the guest speaker for our festival. So I got to spend half a day just, like a puppy going behind Tijan Bai and just interacting with her, watching her. So yeah, I have these very special opportunities that life brought my way to watch performances with a lot of with my curiosity, with my passion, and with my love.
I think that is what is so, personally, I think that what I find so interesting and important in your work, that you are sort of giving new forms to these indigenous storytelling forms, and like you're saying, bringing it, using them in a way, integrating them with everything else that you do in the form of a story that also serves that educational purpose, especially with children and English language teachers. So in that sense, I think you're taking the traditional art form to a different level, to a more, a level that is more relevant for our times, given the challenges that we have, especially in our educational context. So I find your work really like transdisciplinary in that sense. So it's an art form, and yet at the same time, it is a pedagogical, like you yourself say, pedagogical intervention. So in that sense, your work is highly relevant and transdisciplinary in that sense. Yes. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, completely agree with you. I'd just like to add one thing, that I completely respect the authenticity of those art forms, which is why when I collaborate, it is, they are performing and I'm just being the sutradhar. So I would say that I wouldn't think of myself as modifying that art form. I'd rather think of myself as, creating something else. So I remember I just spontaneously said in one of the workshops that they said, what are you doing? Is it Harikatha? Is it Bura Katha? I said, this is Deepa's Story Sutra. Yeah, this is just, we're attempting creating something else, inspired from all of that, and that stays as it is. It's very valuable. It stays as it is. Yeah.
Yes, and I think that's the vibrancy of our cultural tradition. So there is room for new forms, new creative forms, and there is room for the classical forms that have been there since a long time. And we need to have a blend of both. I mean, we need to have revival and conservation and preservation of the timeless forms, and also creating of new forms. You reminded me of, this conversation reminded me of one wonderful story. That's the opening story in the collection, A Flowering Tree and Other Oral Tales, A.K. Ramanujan's collection. And the first story itself is titled A Story and a Song. And I don't want to narrate the whole story because I'm not a storyteller, Deepa, like you are. But one of the things that comes out so beautifully in that story is that if one doesn't tell her story or a song, the story and the song that is within us dies. So in that sense, I think your work encourages children and teachers who work with children, all adults, everyone, to allow children to tell the story within, the song within. So that's something so beautiful. That's like preparing the India of tomorrow, giving them that sense of confidence and expression. So that is so relevant. So I know we could go on, but in the interest of time, I would like to take this moment to really thank you, Deepa, for this wonderful time that you spent with us, insights that you shared with us about your work, about the world of stories and what stories can do. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I didn't realize we have completed an hour.
That's the magic of stories.
I thoroughly enjoyed our interaction, Belu, with you and Ram, both.
Thank you. Thank you. And I will be in touch again, when we plan to do a more live storytelling session,
Sure,
certainly in the
sure,
coming months.
sure.
Thank you. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Bye.